Hey guys, it's Coach Cam. Today let's go over what is high intensity training, where did it come from, and how did I stumble upon this? So to start, high intensity training has its origins in the 1970s with Arthur Jones. Arthur Jones was an exercise scientist who was studying the appropriate amount of training that humans should engage in, specifically weight training. And what he found was that people did best with 3 days a week training full body and training about 10 to 15 sets per workout. Now at the time, that was seen as very low volume because people were used to training how Arnold said to train, which was training for 2 hours a day for 6 days a week. That type of training did not get everybody results, and a lot of people were spending countless hours in the gym with not much to show for it. And at this point is when Arthur Jones started experimenting with Casey Viator, and then Mike Mentzer also entered the picture at this point when he talked to Casey Viator and found out how little Casey was training and asked about it, and he pointed Mike towards Arthur Jones. So then Mike ended up getting in contact with Arthur Jones, finding out more about the training that he was prescribing, and from there Mike learned the proper way to train as well that was known at the time and started implementing it into his training. Now Mike was still training with multiple sets in the early stages into the late 70s. However, it was still far less volume than what was known for at the time. So he was doing probably 2 sets for most exercises. Then you come into the early 1980s, which in 1980, Mike Mentzer lost the Olympia. He was given 5th place, which is extremely controversial. Arnold decided to come back at 1980 after he'd been retired for 5 years, and he somehow wins the show, even though he was less conditioned and less practiced with posing than all the other athletes. This kind of changed the landscape for bodybuilding because it definitely put the high intensity training ideas on the back burner and out of the main spotlight. Whereas if Mike would have won, then high intensity training might have been seen as an accepted way to go for most people. However, it was not. However, in the 80s, Mike Mentzer started working more with Arthur Jones, doing more experiments, training other bodybuilders such as Boyer Coe, and they were finding even better results with less training. Mike also wrote hundreds of articles that he was publishing in bodybuilder magazines, and he was getting a lot of publicity for this. Then, come into the 1990s, Mike Mentzer starts a personal training business at Gold's Gym. He stumbles into talking with Dorian Yates. Then he ends up training Dorian Yates, who Dorian already knew of Mike Mentzer, knew of the training methodologies of high intensity training, and was employing them himself. However, Mike was able to help him and refine his approach even more. Dorian also obviously was a very well-known bodybuilder, went on to win several more Olympias, basically rivaling the amount that Arnold had won up to that point. So then from there, Mike passes away, and I think it was 2001, and his brother Ray Mentzer also passed away like the next day. So, that left the high intensity community without them. However, it has still grown since, and there have been branches of high intensity training such as Super Slow Guild, where they do 10 seconds each direction when they train. And there's other just, high intensity trainers that are using the principles and the variables to their best advantage in order to get muscle growth. So the principles of high intensity training are that training needs to be intense enough to stimulate growth. It needs to be brief enough in the session that it's not too long because of how hard you are training, and then it needs to be infrequent enough that you can recover from and adapt to before you train again. So high intensity training, if I were to explain it to someone in a couple sentences, I would say it's training with 1 set per muscle group taken to failure, and then from there you're going to take days off in order to recover before you can train again. There's different ways to split it up. There's different exercises you can do. However, those are the basic principles, and that's the basic framework around the physiology of weightlifting. Because when you lift a weight, your muscles start with the weakest, smallest muscle fibers and motor units to be recruited. And as those muscle fibers fatigue, your body starts recruiting harder and heavier motor units to be able to lift the weight. So as you continue a set to failure, what you find is the very last rep, or even the last several seconds of the exercise, you are reaching failure, and you're reaching a point where the body has recruited all the muscle fibers that it can possibly recruit that are available to the muscle, and then that's all you can do. That's what triggers the stimulus for growth. And there's a threshold in there of you have to cross this threshold in order to stimulate growth. And if you don't cross it, if you left too many reps in the tank, or you didn't train hard enough with not enough intensity of effort, you will not stimulate growth, at least not to the level that you really could and should be. So the idea is to train one set to failure so that you stimulate all the muscle that's possible, and you do the least amount of volume that is required to do so, because volume is a negative. Work and sets that you perform count against you in terms of recovery. You have more to recover from the more sets you do. So it would be in your best interest to do the proper amount, the precise amount required to stimulate growth. And since you can't stimulate growth without performing a set, you are left to start with the bare minimum, which is one set. So how did I stumble upon high intensity training? Well, I trained distance running in high school and then also in college. And then I also stumbled into body weight training. So I was doing pull-ups, push-ups, dips, getting those as strong as I could, muscle ups. You can see more of that on my Instagram. And from there, the last 2 years, I decided I wanted to grow muscle. I was tired of being a body weight only guy, and I wanted to train for muscle growth. And I had my own garage gym. I had some clients that I was training, and I realized, I would never program not to lift weights for somebody. So I decided to try myself. What can I do to really make the most muscular growth I can? So I started training how most people train, but it was also based on the evidence and research that I was taught, because I also went to school, got a master's degree in exercise science, because it's my passion, it's what I love, and I just want to know everything there is to know about exercise, and I want to understand it the best that I can. So I started off training probably 5 or 6 days a week, doing different splits, push-pull legs, upper lowers, just kind of rotating through, training everything like at least twice a week. Not really legs though, skipping legs a lot of times. Who hasn't ever been through that phase? But basically this past summer, I found out about high intensity training because there was a bodybuilder that I follow. I follow a ton of influencers, bodybuilders on like all social media platforms. And this one was posting in his Instagram stories about different past bodybuilders and, their physiques and how they looked and what they did a little bit. And he posted a picture of Mike Mentzer, and I saw that and I was like, wow, like look at that guy. Like that's a man right there. And I realized like, who is that? And I looked him up, Mike Mentzer. I was like, wow, maybe I can follow him. Maybe he has a social media profile. I mean, the 80s wasn't that long ago, right? Like he should still be here. Nope, turns out he's passed away. So I was sad that I couldn't follow him directly, but I was able to learn through YouTube mostly about his training style, his past, and the high intensity training approach that he so boldly proclaimed. There's dozens of lectures on here that you can listen to of him talking, and really, I just fell in love with it. Like I was so intrigued by the fact that you could train so little, yet you could get the best results of your life. So I looked into it, I studied it for weeks, and then I started implementing it and trying it myself. And obviously when I started implementing this, some people got offended. They were hurt that I chose to like redo my entire training and not just integrate some of the approach, because most people think that that it's a virtue to grant plausibility to all theories and to all approaches, and to only sway a little bit here and there and make minor changes, but that you shouldn't just overhaul everything. But I decided in order to follow this correctly, I needed to pretty much do that. So I went ahead and did, and I've never looked back. So it's been about 4 months now or more since I've been training high intensity, and I absolutely love it. One thing to note is that there is no such thing as like a perfect high intensity training plan. Just following one person's way of doing it is not going to get you the best results. You have to mold it to yourself, especially the recovery aspect, right? What they found out, what Arthur Jones and Mike Mentzer were finding out was, hey, everybody has a different genetic adaptation to recovery ability. So some people can recover faster than others and can recover and handle more volume than others. So it's important to know what is your recovery ability, and assuming that you are an average genetic natural, that this would be the best place for you to train, the best way for you to train, because you may not be getting results overtraining, right? You may not be getting results doing too many sets, getting less stimulus per set, and then having to recover from having done more work. And yet the people who train like this, they also train so many days in the week that they're not really letting their body recover and their nervous system recover to be able to push it to the limit. So it's just such a dichotomy, two different styles of training. You have Arnold's recommendations, long rest times, 2-hour workouts, multiple sets each, perform the reps as fast as possible. And then you have Mike Mentzer's, which is more of a streamlined approach, direct to the stimulus, one set, all out, perform the reps slowly. And then when it comes to rest between sets, you really only take as much rest as you kind of want or need, but you don't take a long rest. And then you train when you're fully recovered, because when you train, the fatigue affects your whole body. Even if I did an upper body only workout, the fatigue is across my entire nervous system, which is going to affect me if I go to try to train legs. If you train just your chest one day, but you do 10 sets of chest, and then the next day you go to train legs, like, you're not 100%. You think you're 100%, but you really would be even more recovered if you gave yourself more days. So it's important when you train high intensity that you want to put as much work and train as many muscles as you can in one session, but then again, you have to watch out for your recovery. So I like to split it into upper and lower sessions, because that way I can recover better. If I had a full body session and actually hit most of my muscles individually, then it would take way too long and I wouldn't be able to recover from that. So that's where I found that my recovery is best. Right now I take about 5 days between workouts. When I started off with taking only 3 days, and then as my recovery wasn't really there, I wasn't progressing, I bumped it up to 4. Now I'm up to 5, sometimes 6 days. So there's really no drawbacks to taking more days in between, because at the end of the day, you tack on 10 years, 20 years to this, you're gonna hit your genetic potential. It's just a matter of what's the most efficient way to do it. And with high intensity training, so I've been told, is you can get to your genetic potential in like 2 years. There's really no reason why you couldn't or shouldn't be very, very close to it in about 2 years, because you're progressing every single workout. That's one thing that Mike Mentzer hammered in his lectures and articles was, why are you showing up to the gym if you're not going to make progress? Like, you haven't adapted yet if you haven't made any progress showing up. So, you might as well try this approach, take a break from the gym, come back ready to go, and actually push for more reps, more weight, or more time that you spent in the set. So hopefully this video gave you guys some idea of what high intensity training is, how I stumbled upon it, and kind of piqued your interest into it. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe for more, follow me on Instagram at coach_Cam, and I hope to see you guys around.